In 2007, without a single diss track or public feud, Michael Jackson flipped the power script on Eminem, gaining ownership of the very songs used to mock him, including Without Me. It was not an accident or a coincidence. It was a calculated $370 million move decades in the making, revealing how control in music is not about words, but who collects the checks. So how did Jackson turn silence into his ultimate comeback? And what happened behind the scenes that changed industry ownership forever? In 1985, Michael Jackson stunned the music world by writing a $47.5 million check to ATV Music, a catalog that included the entire Lennon-McCartney Beatles songbook. The deal was not just about nostalgia or admiration for the Beatles. Jackson outbid Paul McCartney himself, ignoring warnings that the price was too steep and the competition too fierce. The negotiations dragged on for months, with rival bidders circling and industry veterans doubting that a pop star could pull off such a move. Jackson's team, led by attorney John Branca, worked quietly behind the scenes, navigating a maze of publishers, lawyers, and old contracts. When the dust settled, Jackson did not just own a piece of music history, he controlled the rights to some of the most valuable songs ever written. Every time a Beatles song played on the radio, appeared in a movie, or was covered by another artist, Jackson collected a share. This single purchase shifted the way artists thought about power in the industry. It was no longer just about performing or recording. Owning the songs themselves meant collecting checks for decades, regardless of who sang them. Jackson's decision in 1985 was not a whim or a flex. It was the start of a pattern, investing in publishing as the foundation of true leverage in music. 10 years after the Beatles' catalog deal, Michael Jackson made another move that changed the music business. In 1995, he merged his ATV Music catalog with Sony's publishing division, creating Sony ATV Music Publishing. The agreement was not a simple sale or a cash out. Jackson kept a full 50% stake, giving him equal say in every major decision the company made. Sony brought its global reach and resources, and Jackson brought the crown jewel catalogs and a proven eye for valuable music rights. Together, they built a publishing powerhouse that managed not just Beatles songs, but hits from Bob Dylan, Willie Nelson, and Stevie Wonder. Industry insiders saw this as a sign of Jackson's commitment to the long game. Music historian J. Randy Taraborelli described Jackson's approach as relentless, never content to sit on his past victories, always looking for the next foothold in the industry's power structure. The Sony ATV joint venture gave Jackson protection from market swings and the ability to scale his influence far beyond a single catalog. By consolidating with Sony, he transformed his private collection into a global empire, setting up a structure that could absorb even more catalogs in the future. This move revealed a pattern. Jackson did not just buy music, he built institutions that would outlast any single artist or trend. On May 30th, 2007, Sony ATV Music Publishing announced a deal that sent shockwaves through the industry. The company, jointly owned by Sony and Michael Jackson, agreed to buy Famous Music, LLC, from Viacom for $370 million in cash, plus the assumption of about $30 million in debt. The press release named Martin Bandier, Sony ATV's newly appointed chief executive officer, as the architect of the purchase. The acquisition was massive in scope. Over 125,000 songs instantly came under Sony ATV's control. This was not just a collection of old standards or forgotten film scores. The catalog included contemporary hits from artists like Eminem, Shakira, Beck, Bjork, and Akon, as well as iconic movie themes from The Godfather and Mission Impossible. Eminem's publishing rights, covering songs such as The Real Slim Shady, Without Me, and Just Lose It, were explicitly listed among the assets. Every time one of these songs played on the radio, streamed online, or was licensed for advertising, Sony ATV collected a share of the royalties. Jackson called the deal a milestone, saying the diverse collection of songs in this catalog ranged from timeless classics to contemporary hits, and that he was pleased to add the acquisition of Famous Music to Sony ATV. Sony ATV's purchase was not a targeted strike at a single artist. The numbers alone tell the story. $370 million for a catalog spanning every genre and era, with Eminem's catalog just one part of a much larger equation. But with one transaction, Jackson's company now held the keys to the very songs that had once made him the subject of public mockery. Martin Bandier, who took the helm at Sony TV just weeks before the famous music acquisition, described the deal as a defining moment for the company. In interviews with the trade press, Bandier called the catalog one of the most diverse and prestigious collections in the world, emphasizing that its value came from the sheer range of artists and genres under its umbrella. He pointed out that the real strength of a publisher wasn't just in owning the classics. It was in being able to collect royalties from every corner of the industry, from film scores to hip-hop anthems. A former Sony ATV executive, speaking years later, explained that the team viewed catalog expansion as a way to amass influence quietly. The executive said we looked for catalogs that gave us leverage across the board. It was never about targeting one artist. It was about owning the conversation, having a seat at every table. The executive recalled that inside the company, the famous music deal was seen as a strategic leap. Eminem's catalog was certainly a highlight, but it was the combination of contemporary hits and legacy songs that made the acquisition a game changer. Bandier's approach echoed a philosophy that had guided Sony TV for years, that true power in music comes from controlling rights, not chasing headlines. The company's executives rarely commented on public feuds or artist drama. Instead, they focused on building a portfolio so broad that every new hit, every radio play, and every licensing deal sent a share back to their office. This mindset, confirmed by those who worked alongside Bandier, turned the company into a silent heavyweight, one whose influence reached far beyond the front page. Every song you hear on the radio, in a movie, or on a streaming service generates money in more ways than one. The cash flow starts with three main types of royalties: mechanical, performance, and sync. Mechanical royalties are paid out every time a song is reproduced. Think compact discs, vinyl, or digital downloads. Performance royalties come from public plays, whether it is on the radio, in a club, or streamed online. Sync royalties are earned when a song is licensed for use in film, television, commercials, or video games. The publisher sits at the heart of this system, collecting and distributing these payments. But there is a catch. Publishers rarely work for free. They take what is called an administration fee, usually between 10% and 20% of the royalties, before passing the rest to the songwriter. This fee covers the cost of tracking, collecting, and enforcing rights around the world. Understanding these revenue streams is key to understanding how power shifts in the music business and why owning publishing rights can be more valuable than performing the songs yourself. When a global brand wants to use a hit song in an ad, the process stops cold without the publisher's sign-off. In the case of Eminem's catalog, after the 2007 sale, Sony ATV, co-owned by Michael Jackson, became the gatekeeper for every synchronization license. If a car company wanted to feature Without Me in a Super Bowl commercial, their first call went to Sony ATV's licensing department, not Eminem or his label. The publisher reviewed the request, weighed the brand, the message, and the price. Approval meant revenue flowed to both the publisher and the songwriter. A denial, though, shut down the entire deal, no matter how much money was on the table. But there is a boundary. Publishing control covers the songwriting, the lyrics, and the melody, not the master recording. That is a separate right, usually held by the label. The FBT versus Aftermath case made this split clear. Publishers collect on the composition, but they cannot touch the sound recording revenue or block releases outright. Jackson's leverage as co-owner of Sony ATV meant he could approve or deny new commercial uses of Eminem's songs, but he could not erase the tracks or silence Eminem's voice. Power in publishing is real, but it has its limits, defined by contracts, court rulings, and the industry's unwritten rules. Today, catalog rights control billions in music revenue, often held by those you never see. Jackson's silent move reminds us, in an industry obsessed with noise, real power flows through contracts, not headlines. Ownership still decides who profits and who is just a story. What do you think? Share below.